Welcome back to the Ethan Clerc podcast show. This is the 20th episode. Got it written down right here so I don't forget. And it is also the last episode at the Bark Center in Windham, and the last episode in Windham until we decide to come back, bring the show on the road, and come back to Windham, because me, Matt, and Colin are moving to Mankato. So we will continue to do the podcast there for anyone who's wondering, and we will hopefully find interesting people. I don't know if you know anybody out there, Joyce, in Mankato, who'd be interested coming on the podcast.
I might.
There you go. Yeah. Well, and that's what John said too. And Damon, you said you might know a couple people as well.
I have a house there. I'll make
it. So we'll have to just find out who we can get on there and try to get more interesting people, because that's kind of what the whole thing behind the podcast is, just talking to people, getting different perspectives. Whether it doesn't matter what you believe or what your point of view is, we kind of want to talk to you and just get a whole lot of opinions on here. So we're going to keep going with it, like I said, and we're going to, keep making it work. But tonight is the memorial, I don't know if that's the right word, memorial, or the final episode in Windham for a while now. So it's kind of sad, and I got to look back at everything and all the people we brought in here. We started back in March, and we went all summer, got a lot of cool people on here, and I'm going to miss the studio because it's really treated us well. And I got to give a huge thank you to Greg Warner, everybody at the Bark, for letting us use this space and bringing random people in here that might not be welcome all the time. But they gave us a great opportunity to make something happen, and they did it for just the benefit of helping us out. So I really have to thank Bark and Greg Warner and everyone here for making that possible, because we've really had a great run of 20 episodes. I think we did 19 of them in the Bark. The first episode was in our basement.
That's true.
You were on it. And but interesting start, and we got Mason here for the last one in Windham, so hopefully everything tonight goes well, and we got a very interesting topic. But before we get into that, if you could just share, comment, retweet, subscribe, and give the podcast a review if you're on iTunes, or I don't know if you can review on Spotify or not, but we are on Spotify now, so you can check the podcast out on there, just the Ethan Clerc Show. We also are on Google Play and Podbean and any other streaming service. So we're really trying to get out there, and we really appreciate everyone who spreads the word and lets their family and friends know about it. And if that's another thing, if anyone has any topics that they would like to be discussed on the podcast, we are always open to new ideas and new topics, because sometimes it's good to hear what the people want instead of us just coming on here and talking about things that we find interesting. You got to get the people's perspective. So that being said, we have Mason Leopold back on tonight. Great to have you. Thank you for coming back on.
Yep.
We got Damon. You're very excited, I could tell. We got Damon Weinandt on again.
Thanks for having me, Ethan.
Do you know what episode this is officially that you were on? How many?
I think the 8th one.
8th or 9th?
8th or 9th,
God,
yeah.
That's crazy.
That's almost half of them.
That is. That's awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, and it's always good to have you. And Mr. Joyce, we have you on. This is your second time on?
Second.
Mr. Bryan Joyce, my high school social teacher, and a good friend who's helped out with the movies before, and there's a whole bunch of things. You're also a city council member, and you want to talk about some of the other things you're doing, or if I hit the nail on the head for everything?
I'm mostly here because I'm Mason's teacher.
Oh, got to keep him in line.
And Dean of Students this year.
Dean of Students,
getting that going, so that's exciting right now. So.
School's about to kick off.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Week from today, Mason.
Week from today.
This should count as extra credit. It's like,
we don't give
that
anymore.
We don't give extra credit anymore.
Write your name, get 2 points.
Well, here's a question. Do they teach this in school? Probably not.
This topic, it's a delicate one, because the religious element of it is hard to discuss with some of it. But, when you get into sociology and you talk about groups and behaviors and things like that, I've referenced this when I've taught that class.
Oh, really?
It's not necessarily the whole point of your curriculum, but it's very easy to bring up because it's still relatively current, and kids can find info about it. So, and it's very relatable. I think there's a lot of connections to the way people behave within these groups, and there's shows nowadays too. I mean, I don't want to jump into a lot of these topics. We talk like Big Love and shows like that, where the polygamous type stuff, and some of that was going on. Within the Branch Davidians.
Did you tell the listeners what we're talking about?
Well, that's what I was going to say. The topic of the night is David Koresh and what is the name of his group? I just forgot it. Branch Davidians. Branch Davidians. That is out of Waco, Texas. And this happened in 93, I think, was the year. That is when the whole thing kind of...
That's when it blew up.
Yeah, that's when it blew up. But it was something that David Koresh had been building, this group of people this cult, this church, that he thought that he was a prophet. I don't know if it was he thought that he was on a mission from God, or if he was sent from God to, fulfill his fantasies or whatever. There's a whole lot of conspiracy theories that go into it. Before we start, I think it's important, like you said, Joyce, that we talk about the psychological aspects of this, because my biggest question is, how do you convince all these random people from different walks of life to come live in this compound with you and pretty much give up their whole life for this guy? That's what I don't understand. How could someone be so convincing that you'd literally give up your wife to this guy?
Well, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
First of all,
well, that's good to
I'd like to go on the record.
Yeah.
Or my kids or anybody else I know for that matter. But I think it's vulnerability. And I think of David Koresh, and I instantly think of like Helter Skelter, and I think of Charles Manson. And I think of young vulnerable kids going to Haight-Ashbury and trying to find their way. And there's a drug element in that one and whatnot, but they're vulnerable. They're young. They're impressionable.
Emotional.
And this gentleman gives them something, emotionally that they're seeking, and he preys on it. Manson did that for his demented view. And I as I was reading Koresh again a little bit today, that's what I was thinking of. Is these are impressionable people. What the crazy part is, though, is parents that joined this.
Oh yeah.
That willingly gave up their kids to him to procreate with.
Yeah.
And that was the I can't wrap my head around that part of it.
That's what these leaders are. That's what they do. They go and they seduce each individual and how they have to, the groups that they're looking for, because not only vulnerability, people like looking to make a difference or lost or want a feeling of fulfillment. There's like, I don't know if you can say there's like one set person they go after. It just depends on who they find and they find them.
Right. You don't know if they're downtrodden. Like these might be people who turn to this particular sect of the, this group when they were down and out, and somebody's preying on it. That's a possibility. But there isn't just one reason. This gentleman was obviously, he didn't have the greatest upbringing either.
Oh,
It was a tough life to an extent, but I think you have to say manipulative.
Oh yeah,
and knew how to play people to get what he felt, was his.
Do you think it might be something where these people didn't have, maybe not homeless, but he offered them a home, he offered them shelter and food and a group of people that were like-minded? Is it something where it was like these people saw it as like a gift or something to them, that they could utilize this as a home and a group of people to get to know and to build a family around, and they didn't look at the negatives because they were so focused on a better life?
I'm sure that could be part of it. I think like in this instance, on paper, if you looked at it, it might look pretty inviting, like at first, and maybe it starts out slowly and it builds up to what it had become, and what David Koresh was thinking at the beginning, if he was really thinking about what his intentions were at first. I don't know, his intentions I would probably say weren't positive when he started.
No.
Like, I mean, some cults maybe do start out positive, or then they progress to a destructive cult.
I think this one actually, he started positive.
Right. In religion's a pretty powerful,
Oh, sure, because he kind of branched off from the Seventh-day Advent church.
And I think when people are very devoutly religious, like to an extreme, as these people obviously are, trying to convince them to do something, it's like there's not really convincing, because you've got them, because the religion is such a big part of their life.
You could say, God told me to tell you this.
And when you are bought into that ideology and that way of thinking, there's very little convincing that has to go on, because it's like, this gentleman is your, they believe he's the precursor to the Messiah, so we better listen.
And then they do anything he says when it comes to that other stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think we should go into a little bit about David Koresh's past before this kind of all blew up, because he's got an interesting history. Kind of like you mentioned, it was a difficult family life at home. Pretty sure his dad left, or maybe it was the other way around. His mom left or his dad left, one of them. And the other one got remarried, and it was a very physically abusive relationship. And that we all know that it starts at home. A lot of these people who end up becoming sociopaths or psychopaths, it starts off when they're a child and they're not raised right. It starts off when people just don't have that firm upbringing where they know right from wrong. And you see them start to develop these sociopathic tendencies, and I think that's what ended up happening to David. He's actually born, his real name is Vernon Howell, and he changed his name to David Koresh for, I think he said it was because of fame, and it was something that God told him to do, change his name. So his actual name is Vernon Howell. And like I said, self-proclaimed prophet, and from an early age, he was extremely into religion. He memorized the Bible. He could quote scripture like that. He really made a name for himself. And I think it started off positive because for people around him, they probably thought it was great. He's getting into the Bible and he's not out doing bad things. He's actually focusing all of his energy on the Bible. I think it really turned bad when he started telling people that he was like the Son of God or someone that God sent to earth to change people. And I don't really know the exact story about how you go from just someone reading the Bible to you're the Son of God. I don't know how that happens. I don't know if it's drugs or what, but
to back up just a little bit, if what we're reading about his background is true, and I'm sure it can be verified, but his mom's 14 when she has him.
Really? Wow.
And Dad was 19 or 20. Okay.
Did
then
you see which one left?
Dad left to find another teenage girl.
Oh, jeez.
That's his upbringing. So his biological father impregnates a 14-year-old and then leaves while she's pregnant and finds another teenage girl.
Yeah.
And then what David Koresh becomes his name, but he's a Howell originally. But Koresh,
and if he's grabbing if he's grabbing the Bible to read, you'd assume or research that his parents were active in a church or doing some of the same, and
right.
Even that's maybe not uncommon for that church for 19 and 14.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it says anything on their.
I should step that back. Not a church. That's not common.
Yeah,
that's not common.
Yeah, I don't know if it's part of the religion or what. I don't know if he grew up.
It's not part of the religion.
Yeah,
but,
I don't know if he grew up Seventh-day Adventist or I don't know.
Koresh.
Yeah. Does it say on there if
he grew up Baptist? I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
and then did he get into the Seventh-day Advent?
Yeah, he kind of met some people, and it got him turned on to this. And there was at some point he had a run-in with a pastor where he believed that the pastor's daughter was given to this world to be with him.
Oh, because he had the early sexual encounter. Yeah,
he had that, and he believed that pastor's daughter was his.
Oh my gosh!
So the pastor expelled him from the church and drove him away.
Jeez.
So this guy had a long history of thinking that young girls were
he's a pedophile.
If he wanted them, they were his. And that's. You look at that that's the definition of,
pedophilia.
And he's preying on young women using religion.
Yep, it's terrible. And they say that pedophilia starts at a pretty young age. I'm pretty sure it starts around 18, 19, 20, right around there. You start preying on younger girls, 12, 13, 14-year-old girls, and then from there on it just gets out of hand. And I think this is a conspiracy theory, but maybe he started this whole religion just to give himself the pleasure of these fantasies that he has for younger girls, and he could get away with it by using the religion as a cover-up. I don't know.
That's how I should have phrased my earlier statement.
Yeah.
Because too often we're seeing that, in lots of churches too. You have to be still aware of what's going on because you don't want to use religion. Not all religion. Religion is good, but too often people are using it for bad things. And, to get away with things.
And I think he really believed what he was saying, though. I think he genuinely believed.
That was the question that was posed,
yeah.
I think he genuinely believed he was the coming of the Messiah.
He convinced himself.
Yeah. And, in the early days, it might have been what you're talking about. He just had these inner drives, and he wanted to fulfill those needs.
Yep.
But I think over time, when he traveled around and spent some time in Israel, and David Koresh, the biblical implications of that name itself, David, King David, Koresh, Cyrus, he believed that he was the coming of, the next coming. And I think that ended up becoming and I'm destined to have these children with these girls, and they're going to be the new kings of the world. And I think if that's the life you're living and you're selling it to people, eventually you probably just start believing it too.
Oh yeah, big time.
Well, and obviously he was willing to die for his beliefs.
Yeah,
too.
That's crazy. Did you know that there are still Branch Davidians around?
Yeah, that's funny. Dane was in Waco a couple years ago. They went.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, because I mentioned I was going to be on here for this. He's like, that would have been great to talk about because they went to Waco to the Magnolia deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Home place.
And he said, well, we drove out there.
Mount Carmel is what
they
it is.
drove out to where the compound was, and he just said it was really eerie.
Oh gosh.
And there's like a little monument there, I think he said, but you'll have to ask him about it.
Yeah.
But he just said it felt very eerie, like people looking at you like, why are you here? And I'm sure they're very not trusting based on what the government did,
Are they still, that's where they're practicing still, or is it just a memorial site?
No, they're still,
they're still practicing.
There's still people there that
people still live there.
Well, people don't live there, but the church is there.
He kind of said there's like some trailer type houses and things around that area
on the compound.
Wow.
Yep.
We were talking about going there when we were down.
So this is still a religion.
Like there's still followers.
People still. And this, beyond the religion part, there are people, we could talk about this more later too, there are people who are so mad about this because they think that the government, and this could be an argument or a debate, that if the government overstepped their bounds here to go get this group of people, if they had an actual reasonable suspicion to go to the compound. And
well, if there's sexual abuse going on, then
and they didn't know that until afterwards. But the reason they go in is because of illegal firearms. The ATF suspects that there's a huge amount, and there was actually a huge amount of illegal weapons in there. They were stockpiling literally for the end of the world, kind of what we talked about before. Mm-hmm. These guys, everything that David preached was the end of the world is coming, and it's coming quick, and we need to be ready. So he literally had food and water stored in there enough for years where they'd be fine. And they had an underground school bus buried underground, like a little bunker. And we can kind of look at, Dalton, bring up the map of
where'd they get all this money to fund this?
That's what I was wondering.
Right.
Where'd they get the money from for all this?
Did they have some wealthy people?
He's not a wealthy man at all.
No?
I don't know if the people that were involved.
Go file it or look online or what?
It should be in there. It's the other one. Go back to Kingston.
While we're pulling this up
should be episode 20 files. What were you gonna say?
To go back to
Koresh photos,
positive religion, and then like what we're talking about here. A couple of main differences where maybe the government would go in and get involved is, I guess I'd say mainstream religion. I don't know if that's the proper term, but that's, you're free to come and go to church, like typically on a Sunday or Saturday. But like these guys have a compound. They don't get to leave, come back.
They don't get to leave.
And in churches, you have kind of like a hierarchy. You have more than one. I mean, you have God. I mean, obviously.
Yep.
But I mean, the management system of a church is you have a few, people involved, like a council.
Yep.
And in a cult, you have that one guy.
David is in charge of everything.
I mean, that's how it is. So, I mean, when the government would have to start looking at, hey, these people are in a compound.
Yeah.
They can't leave.
Yep.
There's a guy who saes he's God.
Yeah.
They have a ton of firearms.
Yeah.
They probably tipped off. I mean, there's obviously females there, and the husbands don't get to spend time with their wives, and David is, and the pedophilia that you're speaking of.
Well, I think it's a little
suspicious. That's some red flags.
A couple red flags in there. Here's an aerial view of the property before the whole siege and everything. So it looks, and I do know that they built this entire place by themselves. The people that live there built it by themselves. Zoom in a little bit on this, Dalton, some of the stuff. Because this is, they talk about a little bit about the siege, which we'll go over later, but this is a good view of the whole place. They have a pool back there, the underground bunkers I was talking about. There's the school bus, and this is all built by them. This is not, there's a gym, there's a church in there. It says women's and children's sleeping quarters, and then David had his own part of the building, which is where, there it is right there, Koresh living quarters. That was where David would bring the women, and obviously we know what happened there. It was his own secluded part where none of the other men were allowed. So he had his own pretty much master bedroom where it was just for David and the women that he had. Because he had, I don't know what it was, but he had like nine or 10 wives, I'm pretty sure.
What's the tank? Like, what was that?
Well, we'll talk about that later. That's when the government comes and gets involved. But you can see back there, fuel storage tanks, pool, there's a water tower. I mean, they really had thought of everything so that if anything happened, they'd be fine, or they thought they'd be fine. You go to the next one, though. I think I have one more map in here. Go back. Right here. Here's another one. This might be a little bit of a different view. This kind of talks about how they attacked and everything, which we'll go over too. They're just a different view of the facility. But go back to the actual picture, Dal, the aerial picture. No. That one. So this was out in the middle. I don't know exactly what the whole surrounding area was, but I'm pretty sure from looking at aerial videos from helicopters, this is literally out in the middle of like nowhere. There's nothing around here really. So they were actually able to tell when the government was coming. When we talk about the whole siege and everything, they knew the cops were coming and had time to get ready to fight back. And when we get to that part, we could kind of talk about more what they did to fight back. But it's interesting that he chose a very remote area, really not by anything, because he knew, I feel like he knew something was going to happen.
I think he wanted them to come fight back because that's part of
what
he...
Really?
Well, I shouldn't... Well, I'm just stepping back on everything, but part of it is to have an enemy, and if you're saying you're going to go off and fight a crusade, I mean, you have to fight somebody. So you want someone to come in and attack you to...
Yeah. Well, go to the videos on here, because we should get into a little bit of these. Just go back into episode 20 files. Okay, let's go to, not the 911 call. Go to Waco, that one. The rare footage. Oh, this is the... Hold on a minute here. No, get out of this one. My bad. Just exit out. Yeah. Go to the the ATF raid. Do that one.
High school dropout and wannabe rock singer, David Koresh now has a new ambition. He claims to be the son of God. And in a compound on the outskirts of town, this would-be Messiah is collecting followers.
Revelation states that Christ has the key of David. There's 150 Psalms here. Some people find it amazing that I know every one of them.
Mostly in their 20s and 30s, from middle-class backgrounds, these true believers are united by a search for meaning in their lives. And they truly believe David Koresh has the answers.
Is he the son of God?
I hope he is.
What would I do for him? I love him as a brother.
The Branch Davidians believe the apocalypse is coming, and they are busy stockpiling illegal weapons, including AK-47s. Worried about the amount of guns the cult are accumulating, the ATF decide to raid the compound. So confident are they of success, agents nicknamed the raid Showtime. But Koresh and his cult members are expecting them.
They knew that the ATF was coming. They had all taken their battle stations. They had more powerful weapons.
So that just kind of gives a brief background of his life, kind of some of the stuff we talked about too. I forgot to mention that his goal in life was to be known for something, and he thought that the rock star, because he played guitar and he had a band and everything. And his mom gives an interview. I couldn't find it again, but I watched it before. His mom gives an interview where she was describing how he thought he was going to be a famous rock star, and that didn't work out for him. He got rejected so many times. That's why she thinks that he turned to the whole church thing, because he wanted to be known for something, and this was his one opportunity where the world would know who David Koresh is. So when the one dream didn't work out, he kind of turned the whole table over, and then that's maybe when he got into the Bible and started, really going out there. And maybe the reason that he claimed he was the Son of God is because if you just have a church, you're not going to be that well known. But if you claim to be the Son of God, people are going to turn their heads and wonder, what's going on. But like you mentioned, Joyce, they talked about the middle class people. They're looking for a way in life, and David Koresh offered them a way in life. And like the lady said, I hope he's the Son of God. And the guy says, I'd fight for him. He's like my brother. And then, like we were talking about before, Damon, it says he made them all become celibates. So they were not allowed to have any sexual interactions with anybody in the compound. Just crazy to me to wrap my head around how something like this could happen. I don't think there's been anything like this to happen since, if I'm correct. I don't think there has been anything to this magnitude.
Not at this level.
No.
There's certainly been
cults and weird things, yeah.
The interesting thing of this is 1993.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton's president for a couple of months. Okay. When this happens.
Yeah.
Because this is April. He just got sworn in January.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
Yep.
So his FBI is in charge of this,
Yep.
essentially. Janet Reno, Attorney General, that's his appointee. And this is a big thing, and the government gets pretty heavily criticized for being pretty heavy-handed when it comes to this, because there's still debate over whether there was anything federally illegal going on within the compound.
Oh, I didn't know there was a debate about that.
They're talking, well, did the government have the authority to go in and do what, and they use the justification, like kids were being hurt.
Kids are being killed,
child abuse being, perpetuated within the compound. And in reality, none of that was proven, but, they know they've got all of these illegal guns.
Yep.
Okay. And if you fast forward to the last few years, I think of the stuff that happened in Idaho and the ranchers, the Clive and Bundy family, that basically had armed standoffs with the government there as well.
What was the other one? There was a really famous one. It started with an R. I can't think of the name. River's Edge or something. Where it was a guy, his family on this property against the government. I can't think of the name of it. I'll have to look it up if you want to keep going with where you're going, Joyce.
Yeah, the Bundy family, though, I mean, they weren't obviously doing what Koresh was doing and anything, of that nature. But, people who said, the government doesn't have a right to be on this land and seize anything that we're doing. They had cattle grazing on property that the government said was theirs. Government came in, armed. People lost their lives over that. And they still have a following of people. And there's that element of this story, too, of people saying, what authority does the federal government have to overreach and do what they're doing here?
Do you think it was or do we know if it was to such a large extent, did local police try to get involved when they heard about claims, then you have to call out for help?
And child protection services in Dallas or in Texas had investigated. And
the police that knew about these guys very well.
It's like they wanted to bust him, but nobody would say anything because he's like Messiah to these people.
Yeah. Right. Ruby Ridge, Idaho is what I was talking about. Okay. It is in 1992, which is weird, a year before the Waco. The modern precedent for government militia standoffs, the 1992 event known as Ruby Ridge, began when FBI agents attempted to take Randall Weaver. Is that what you're talking about?
No, that's a different one.
Different one? An apocalypse-minded white separatist into custody for skipping out on a court hearing. In response, Weaver, his family, and several armed supporters holed up in their Idaho cabin for months. And then the government came and ended up killing all of them. So that's like, I guess you could say that's like the actual first government versus militia standoff. And then Waco happened. I wouldn't say first, but the first modern mainstream. Yeah. And then Waco happened after that. And I think we could kind of go into this more later too, but I think there was an anti-government sentiment that was going around after the Waco thing. Anti-government, anti-police, anti-military.
Well, I remember, I was 10 when this happened, so I remember thinking like, wow, these people are crazy. That was, so as a 10-year-old watching this, it's just like, wow, you got to get these kids out, got to get the women out. Yeah. And I remember thinking like when the government went in, well, that's good, it's over.
Yeah.
And because it was a standoff, it's what, 51 days, I believe it was.
51 days,
okay. Yeah. So I remember, this has got to end. The government should go in and end this. And then after that, I started, and I was, fourth grade or whatever, 10-year-old, fourth grade. So, you're actually watching the news afterwards, and I remember thinking, well, why is there debate?
Why are people against?
What's the issue? Like this guy was bad. He was doing bad things. Yeah. And I didn't understand the whole element of, well, the government maybe didn't have the authority to go in and blow the place up either. Yeah. And then, there's debate over, well, did they probably started the fire themselves? Did they blow it up?
Conspiracy theory.
Yeah, right. We'll kind of go into that too. Yeah. We talk about the ending of this whole thing, but
something had to be done to help those kids. And,
right.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of them were kids too, and a lot of them that were killed in the first standoff. It was a majority kids. I'm pretty sure it was 4 or 5 kids that were killed. That's before they actually came in and like blew the place up.
And it seems like some of this stuff isn't proven, but it seems like the leaders of the cult were kind of sacrificing.
Oh, big time!
I know how it goes. I know how it goes with government, and you have your possessions, and you get warrants and stuff, but if you're not doing anything wrong, open up the door, let people in, don't shoot back, don't shoot at each other, do your investigation, and have your sermons. But hey,
you got, if you're doing illegal things and you're expecting not to get caught, especially when they were like storing like 300 plus military-grade weapons, and they didn't think that the government was going to come.
Looking for...
You know. And the funny thing is, the second part will focus more on the whole ending of this, but when he talks to the police, he literally talks for hours at a time, and he a majority of what he says is about the Bible, and that God told me this, God told me that, and the negotiators are trying to get him to talk about freeing the kids, freeing the women. He can only talk about the Bible and Revelations and quoting verses, and the FBI ends up having a policy that we will not listen to any. They quoted it Bible babble. Nothing that this guy says about the Bible, we're going to cut him off as soon as he starts talking because it's not getting us anywhere. He's literally doing it to free time for these people, or not free time, waste time for the government and the ATF and the FBI who was trying to get in there and get them. He was wasting hours and hours. I mean, they talked to this guy on the phone for, I think one night it was like 7 hours, and he just went on scripture. And when they tried to cut him off, he just kept talking about Bible verses and stuff. So I think this guy was a major con man, and he knew how to manipulate people, and he knew how to keep the government waiting for 51 days. That's crazy. How they didn't go in there sooner, to me, is just outrageous. But like I said, somebody with that, that sociopathic could easily manipulate all those people to not leave while he held the government up for 51 days. That's just crazy, though.
How'd they get the guns?
I don't know. And
That's a lot of guns. They didn't have much.
There's an interview that was actually released not that long ago. I don't have it, but it was with the UPS driver that delivered all the guns to the compound. They interviewed him. He said he had no idea what he was bringing.
How many people were in the compound?
There's over 100.
There was over 100?
Yep. And they had all these guns, but you can actually look up the interview with the UPS driver who was delivering packages daily, and it ended up being military-grade weapons. And I don't know how that goes without UPS seeing that. And back in the day before 9/11, I'm sure there was it wasn't as strict with moving guns and stuff. But there's an actual interview.
Maybe the UPS driver was licensed. He was
he was part of the cult, maybe. Who knows? Well, we're going to take a little break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about the whole ending to this. We've kind of built it up. And now when we come back, we're going to talk about the negotiations, the siege, and then the ending up burning down of the entire complex and the killing of everybody in the Branch Davidians. It's a very crazy story. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Ethan Clerc podcast show. We are talking about David Koresh, the Branch Davidians, the ATF and the FBI raid on the complex, Mount Carmel in Waco, Texas. And we've kind of been breaking down the first part. We were kind of breaking down David Koresh's past and how he got to the point of where people thought that he was the Son of God. And we went over a lot of different things. We talked about why psychologically people would go to him and trust him with, giving up their daughters to him. It's hard for us to wrap our minds around, but you also have to remember this was somebody who was really playing off of people's emotions and really targeting certain types of people and was able to pull them in and really gain all of their trust and then totally abuse it. It's very crazy, and I'm glad we're talking about it because there's a lot of things that you can use from this we can relate to other cults if we ever talk about those in the future, which I don't know if we'll get to those tonight. But the second part here, I want to focus more on how did it lead up to the government getting involved and the aftermath of this, because there's a lot of aftermath that we can talk about, whether that's people not trusting the government anymore, and if the government actually overstepped their bounds here or not is up for debate still to this day. If there was actually evidence or proof that would be enough for the federal government, the FBI and the ATF, to go in there and raid this compound and end up killing everybody is up for debate as well. How that happened, how the fire started. So why don't we start by going into the 911 call. This is David Koresh calling 911, telling them that the government is raiding his compound, and he's just saying, we're good people, we're not trying to do anything. Why is the government on our property? Listen to this 911 call. Very interesting.
Hello?
Yes.
This is Dave Koresh. I'm supposed to call you guys.
This is who, sir?
David Koresh. Mount Carmel Center, we're being shot all up out here.
Okay, where are you?
Oh, where am I? I'm at Mount Carmel Center.
Okay, hang on just a second.
All right.
can hear the battle going on in the background there.
Okay, don't hang up, David, okay? I'm going to get somebody to talk to you.
14427.
Are you in the complex?
70. Hold on, I've got another man.
Are you in the complex?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're here.
Okay.
I've got you on the other side of your phone, so I'm going to pass you. So hold on just a minute. Okay, hold on.
It's like a police department.
Yeah, this Lynch. Hey, Lynch? Yeah. That's kind of a funny name there. Oh, listen, no, now, who am I speaking with? This is David Koresh. Okay, David. The Notorious. What did you guys do that for? Well, David, what I'm doing is I'm trying to establish some communication links with you. No. Let me tell you something. Yes, sir. You see, you brought a bunch of guys out here and you killed some of my children. We told you we wanted to talk. No, how come you guys try to be ATF agents? How come you try to be so big all the time? Okay, David. Now, there's a bunch of us dead. There's a bunch of you guys dead. Now that's your fault. Okay, let's try to resolve this now. Tell me this. Now, you have casualties. How many casualties? Do you want to try to work something out? ATF is pulling back. We're trying to... Why didn't you do that first? Okay, all I'm doing is handling communications. I can't give you that answer, David. Okay. Now, here's the deal. Yeah, you pull your guys out, and I want to talk. But I want to talk on what's it called, Steve? I couldn't hear you. I've got Wayne on the other phone, so go ahead now. Wayne Martin? Yeah, he's on the other phone with me. I've been talking with him, but you're the man that I need to talk to, David. Yeah.
All right, pause it, Dalton. That was kind of funny right away in the beginning. He said his name's Ranch or whatever. Oh, that's kind of a funny name. He's getting shot up, and that's the first thing. You could just know there's something wrong with this guy right away.
I took note that he said the Notorious.
The Notorious, yeah.
He gave himself that title.
And I like when the lady said, who is this? David Koresh. Like, you should know who I am. Where are you? Right. We're at the Mount Carmel Center. Like, he was kind of laughing. Like, how do you not know who I am? Everyone should know who I am. That was kind of weird. What happens, this is a long call. It goes on for another 12 minutes. He ends up the ATF pulls their guys away, and David talks to the guy and says that they're not going to shoot anymore. And then the guy asks him if they can come get the men that were killed. There were 4 ATF agents that were killed in the shooting. And David Koresh asked, or the police officer asked if they would stop shooting so that the ATF could go in and pull the ATF agents out. David Koresh ends up cooperating, letting the ATF get their 4 guys, and then from this moment on, it is a constant surveillance / military moving in to watch this place. They aren't going to use any military force, which ends up being 51 days of no actual military moving in. But they end up setting a camp up in the desert here, kind of to watch David and to watch the compound. And this turns into negotiating after negotiation after, I think they bring on like 13 different FBI negotiators, or what do you call them, hostage crisis negotiators, whatever. Yeah. And they bring on 13 different ones, and it's because if David didn't get along with them, he'd make them bring on another one, or he wouldn't talk. So he was kind of controlling the government. Why don't you go to the video, doll, of the actual siege? It was that video we started watching. No, not that one. The other one. Kind of jump back into where we paused it. There's some pretty good footage in there. No, not this one. Not this one. The video that we were watching before, it was the History Channel video. Yeah, that one.
The Nat Geo one?
Yeah, the Nat Geo one.
Yep.
Skip back into it. Kind of where we left
halfway through, I think.
Go into like, I don't
high school dropout and one
about halfway through.
Rock singer David.
Go about halfway through. Yeah, right here. This is showing the ATF rating.
They knew that the ATF was coming. They had all taken their battle stations. They had more powerful weaponry. One ATF agent described it as a hailstorm in reverse.
There's one of them killed right there.
It looked like a dust-off from a fire zone in Vietnam with a medevac helicopter coming in to pull people out. It was chaos. It was very, very disturbing.
4 ATF agents are killed in the raid, and 5 Branch Davidians.
They had bigger firearms than we had. They were able to shoot through doors. Due to that, you know, a lot of our agents were hurt.
305 guns, wow.
124 members survive in the compound, including David Koresh. The FBI is called in to replace the ATF.
All right, pause right here, Dalton. This kind of moves on to the 51-day thing I was talking about. After this happens, the ATF is kind of out of it, or they bring the FBI as backup, because this kind of turns more into people are getting killed. This is a lot more serious than a couple guys talking about Jesus in a compound out in the desert. This becomes...
Were any of the Branch Davidians killed in that
yeah,
exchange?
six of them were.
Sorry,
yep, and I'm pretty sure most of them were kids, actually. I don't...
what were the ages of the kids?
They were young. They were, you know, a lot of these were actually kids that David had with wives of the other men. So he had kids, and like Joyce said, probably raising them up to be future son of the son of man or whatever, the son of God, future people like that. Very interesting that 124 of them would still think this is a good idea to be here after people are getting killed, the government's coming. I'd get the heck out of there. And I don't know.
There's that call to X.
Yeah, you believe it so much that he preaches that this is coming the whole time. I don't know. Are you reading something else about this too, Joyce? Or?
Yeah, I just found a different article that it was 25 years afterwards. Kind of got into some of this stuff. So it actually just came out this year. But it mentions that basically since then, the government didn't necessarily have justification to go in, but Janet Reno was the first female attorney general in the United States history, which I think is an important side piece of this. And she's only 3 months into the job, and she wants to kind of assert the fact that she's the attorney general. And
she was around.
Well, she was given some information by some agents that maybe since then has proved to be unfounded about child abuse. And she used that as, okay, well, we better go in.
Yeah.
And then she got a lot of criticism for it.
Oh, really?
Clinton stood by her the whole time.
I know that Clinton was involved in this. They were telling him.
And he was relying on Reno, and she's relying on the field agents that are there, the ATF and the FBI.
Yeah.
So, but she got a lot of heat over, you know, basically it's her call on whether they go in or not, because it was split in the FBI. Some on the FBI thought Koresh is going to give himself up. And others, no, he's not going to. They got this arsenal. We have to go in. Hindsight's 20/20, you know, and we know that it's unfortunate that, you know, 70-some people had to lose their lives.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is, like, did it have to come to this? I mean, it really, with all these kids dying, is this really what it had to come to? Or could they have waited longer and just allowed Koresh to come out? And
well, I can see that part of the argument, and I did think that for a while, but then I started reading about each day. There's a timeline of events online. I don't remember the website. I wrote down a lot of them, and I can go through them, but they gave David Koresh and they gave the compound like unlimited amount of chances to make this right, and he turned down every single one of them. I'll kind of read over some of these.
How is it the kids' fault, though?
It isn't the kids' fault. And David, he did trap these people in there. He did tell them that they were not allowed to leave after this.
Part of the cult.
Part of the cult wanted to leave. Part of them was so dedicated that they were going to give their life up. But there was a lot of people there that wanted to leave. And the first hostage negotiator that actually disagreed with the FBI and the whole thing that happened, he freed 23 people. He talked to David and let 24 people get out. Those are the only 23 people that got out. Everyone else, from the day he was fired, there was never another person released. So yeah, I can see where you're coming from. Why would everyone have to be punished for one man's decisions? But I kind of just want to go through the multiple attempts here where they gave him multiple chances. So after that raid, what we just watched, where they came and they killed 4 ATF members, that was on February 28th. On March 2nd, March 1st, Clinton was informed about it, and he knew all the events and everything. He kind of gave authority for the FBI to move in. March 2nd is when David made an audio tape for the radio. It's a sermon, an hour long, and they play that on Christian Broadcast Network. They actually play his message. This is something they were trying to work with them, and the Christian Broadcast Network said that they would play it. and they actually played his hour-long sermon on the radio. That was just the beginning, though. Then on March 7th, the FBI refuses to deliver milk to the kids unless they refuse to deliver milk at all unless the kids are released. David does not let that happen. He declines. March 9th, the electricity is cut off, trying to get them to cooperate. Koresh says he won't talk to anybody until the power is turned back on. So they turn it back on. He talks to them. They go on an all-night-long negotiation. Nothing gets done. He just talks about the Bible. March 10th, the next day, they cut the electricity off again, and 4.5 more hours of negotiations lead absolutely nowhere. There's nothing that gets done. March 14th, 4 days later, the electricity is still off. It's cold out now. It said the people were freezing. They were contacting the government saying, please turn it back on. We're freezing in here. The FBI says no. They set up giant lights outside to disrupt sleep, huge spotlights on the property shining down in all the windows. They get extremely mad, especially David. Then the FBI, if they didn't go far enough, 4 days later, power's still off, the FBI brings in these giant speakers, like some massive speakers up on huge poles, and they start broadcasting just crazy like Tibetan music and humming, Christmas music, like pop hits. And David puts his own music on speakers and starts blaring it back. There's a video on here, Dalton. You can actually hear them blaring music. There's a guy who gets in and starts driving through. Go to do the Waco Siege rare footage maybe. That might be it. And I go to 2245 if you can. It's a long video. 22.
Second year here, you'll see that Bradley.
Start right here. Yeah. Yep, start right here. You can hear the music playing. It's a really grainy video, but
it's eerie.
Got the checkpoint.
Is this FBI video?
This is ATF video. Yep.
Usual security is airtight.
And there was not. You can pause it, doll. It just pretty much. This is footage that the guy claims on YouTube. He got this. He's not supposed to have it from the ATF. It's 45 minutes long, and it has helicopter footage. It's all really blurry and grainy, so you can't really make out too much. But I thought it was eerie that this is probably from half a mile, maybe a mile away. You can hear the music blaring. They were blasting this music in there, trying to get them to come out, and it didn't work. So that's on the, that is on the 18th and through the 21st, and then it goes into April. April 6th, the music is still playing. So this is a week later, 2 weeks later, and the tensions are very high. On the 16th, David has completed the first of his lengthy religious documents. His whole entire excuse for being holding the government up, because God was telling him stuff that he needed to write down. And I don't remember what it was called, but he wrote down this giant document where he had written all these things that were going to happen and the end of the world and all this stuff.
So is that his end game, like Armageddon, like the end of the world, like they're fighting for this?
They're fighting for the end of the world, yeah. Right. And he thinks that this is part of it. And he's writing these documents, and that's why he's holding the government off. And on the 19th, that is when the government said we've had enough, and they move in, and that is when, things go crazy. The tanks come in, and they bring...
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around what the right answer is when, say, there's components on both sides of the government overstepping with the safety of every member, and not just the kids, too. If, you're part of a cult and brainwashed, like, who you're... Like you have to let like Child Protective Services in on a normal situation to check on the well-being of people.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and yes, there's both sides of the coin where people that don't want government to overstep, but we're talking about safety here, and not just this instance too. I mean, you don't want it to get to this point, so that's why you have to do a good job before it gets to this point. And like you said at the beginning of the second half, educating people and having a system set up where hopefully this doesn't reoccur.
Oh yeah, big time.
Keep reoccurring.
And county services go in all the time in our country and remove kids from homes.
Yeah.
For probably a lot less than
hopefully
what's going on here.
And then you hear 305 guns. I mean, you're going to get others involved.
Right. And these are illegal firearms, and you're holding all these people, and they're not hostage, but you know,
at this point, I would call them hostages. Well, because I mean, don't you think if they were agreed to this from the beginning, I think you kind of go 100% in.
Yeah, and you let people in. I mean,
well, and the kids have no choice.
No,
because you know they're not going to leave their parents, and you know they're not going to come out.
No.
So the FBI is trying to do what they feel is best for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
They use tear gas.
Yep. They shot a lot of it in there.
And then since then, it's been proven that the Branch Davidians started the fire.
Oh, really?
You know, I think that's one piece of what I read today was that, you know, there's some audio recording was released that they started the fire. And that was one thing that was debated, you know, but
that's going to be your conspiracy theory on the flip side of.
But you look at that too and you say, you know, if the government was really wanting to do what was best for the kids, if they know these people are end of the worlders and Armageddon is coming and they've got all this arsenal, if you move in, what are they going to do?
Yeah, you gave them.
They're going to kill themselves.
Yeah.
They're going to kill the kids, and now you've lost all these kids.
Yeah.
So was there a better way to go about it, I think is the question that most people ask. You know, not that what they're doing is right or wrong.
And I can't sit here and figure that out, and that's why it's been a tough one for me.
Well, after me reading the long list of things, that's just a couple of them. I didn't read every day. I just read highlights that I thought. After reading all the stuff that the government did, do you think there was a large number of opportunities where they had the time to give up and, you know, that they even put on the speakers, you can come out, we're not going to do anything if you come out and with your hands up.
When you have 305 stockpiled guns and you're doing what you're doing living there, I don't think you have it on your mind to give up like that, under the circumstances, and you know, trying to wrap a rational thought around something that's almost impossible to wrap a rational thought around.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, because people bring up the argument that the government wasn't justified in doing this. But then you read the 51 days of what they did to give them opportunities.
Yeah.
Then it kind of changes your mind.
And it's tough for me to sit here and think of that side of it, because it almost makes you have to side with what he was doing.
Yeah.
If you're saying that the government shouldn't go in.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you take it by a case-by-case basis, I mean, again, go back to what's best for everyone involved there.
Yeah.
It's, I just said, it's a tough one to ration.
Big time. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a video, Dalt, of a guy that got out. I think it's called something about a survivor. Yeah. He describes the escape. He describes the fire, and maybe this will bring some light to what we're talking about.
Where were you, and how'd you make your way out?
Well, as the ramming went on, the ones that were with me in the chapel, when the tank would come in the front and spray, we'd move as far back as we could. The tank had pushed a big hole in the wall, and so we kind of saying, well, you know, if we jump out this hole, will they shoot us? We didn't know. I think it was about noon. Somebody from upstairs yelled, "The building's on fire." All of a sudden, all of this smoke came down this outside of the building. And when it got to the hole, it got sucked in, and everything turned black. You couldn't see anything, and I'm praying, saying, "Lord, you better do something if you're going to get us out of this." I'd have probably been burned to death, except that people behind me further into the building started screaming. So I jumped up and I stumbled over all this debris and jumped out of the hole. And when I got out, I kind of looked back, and the hole was just a mass of flames, and I thought, man, I'm the only one that got out. The skin was rolling off my hands. It wasn't blistering, it was just rolling off. There was a big, like a fireball went up about in the center of the building. Then when I saw the fireball, I said, well, nobody's getting out of there now.
Yeah, so that guy talks about how the fire started upstairs or whatever, and he only got out because people were yelling inside, so he had enough time to get to the door and get out of there. That fire, though, there's some pictures on here, Doll. If you go to the other pictures I have, that's a massive fire. Literally, I don't know how the government would even, you know, I guess they could throw stuff in there and get a big fire going, but to me it looks like it was started from the inside. Just such a huge fire. To maybe, I don't know what their whole idea was. Maybe it was the group was trying to commit suicide at the last minute when they realized that they couldn't get away with it. Some of these pictures are just wild.
Were they busting the holes of the tank to try to let people escape through there, just to show that they're going to come in with force, or was that said?
This picture.
What's this picture?
This picture is one of the Branch Davidians. Before the raid, she got out, was just walking down the path. This is before I think things got crazy. She got out of there, and obviously I don't know. She got across there. I don't know what the top says. Toxie or something. It's got some dogs.
If you think about the battle they're fighting, though, the Branch Davidians here with Koresh, they're fighting against the government for their ability to do what they want on their property, whatever. But they believe they're fighting a battle that's bigger than human existence. So to blow up their compound and kill themselves probably wasn't
true
that big of a stretch, because to give up is worse.
The last resort. I mean, look at this fire, though. That's just crazy big. Yeah. And then that huge explosion in there. I don't know if I have any other pictures. The aftermath, doll. I definitely have a picture of that. Because the entire... There it is. That is the next day. The entire place is burnt down. And I don't think that the... I don't know if they tried putting out the fire.
David Koresh realizes, I mean, if he has... He knows what he's going to face if they get him.
Exactly.
So, I mean, he's not going to...
Well, there's a conspiracy theory
about... Of course there is.
About what happened, and there's a couple different theories. I have them written down here. His right-hand man, Steve Schneider, apparently, this is what the FBI released as the official statement, realized that David Koresh was a fraud and shot David in the head right when the fire was going on. Killed him and then killed himself. Their bodies were
quite
found.
a moment to realize that.
A moment of clarity there in the smoke.
Yeah, Billy's on fire. Yeah, I don't buy into what you're saying, man.
And to kind of go, this might come up later too in a different episode. But when we talk about the Jonestown thing, hopefully we talk about that one day. There's a conspiracy that one of Jim Jones's people actually shot him in the head, and that Jim Jones never was going to drink the Kool-Aid. That's a conspiracy. But that's a whole nother thing. Could really go off on that.
We have to mention a conspiracy every podcast.
We do. Well, there's conspiracies about the whole thing because no one knows where the fire... I don't know if you found anything about...
Frontline did a study on it, and basically there was the milk cartons you mentioned.
Yep.
The FBI had put microphones in the milk cartons. So
and that started an electric fire?
No. They caught some audio where they heard.
Oh, they heard him talking.
Should we start it now? Does David want us to start the fire?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that.
So, I mean, it's Frontline, so, I mean, I can trust that source. I think it's probably legitimate news. But they're kind of rehashing some of the stuff. But the government has been fairly protective over a lot of these records, too. Because it is such a touchy thing, and there's no real... I don't think any prosecutions came or anything, but the government was under pretty heavy scrutiny afterwards because of all these kids dying. That was the tough part for a lot of people to swallow was, did all these kids have to die? You know, and if the government played any role in forcing that to happen, that's the exact opposite of what they wanted to happen, which was get the kids out. You know, let Koresh.
I can only believe like maybe trying to be proactive because I mean, like in a case like Jonestown, at any time they could do the same type of thing, and then all the kids would be dead, and the government sat there and didn't do anything, and then people would be up in arms because they didn't do anything.
Yeah. Well, and actually 13 people, because Joyce, you said you don't know if anyone got charged. 13 Branch Davidians did get charged with the weapons charges and everything that survived. They did get charged. So there were people that did get the punishment, but nothing will ever get done about David Koresh getting away with the sick, twisted rape. And I mean, there's all kinds of things that he was doing that he should have got charged for, but he ended up getting away with it. Well, I guess not really getting away with it if you're dead, but he never got charged and had to see the prison sentence or anything. So that's kind of a different argument itself. But the aftermath...
Do you think if he was still alive, he would have more of a following?
Oh,
that's like a Manson thing.
Well, right, we're almost, you know, and if no murders had taken place and he was just this guy leading this religious wave and had written this manifesto and then gave himself up, would he almost be like a sacrificial being to people and then have more followers?
That's a different way to look at it, yeah.
Not to rational people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you'd fall in there and all those charges that would come out, but... I never thought of that angle if you wanted to survive something like that.
Because all those people are not just going to say, all right, yeah, he was crazy.
Yeah.
You were right, you know. Because to a lot of those people in there, like, that's dad.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's the father of many of those kids.
Or if he, you know, we mentioned at the beginning he brushed up on the Bible. I mean, if he feels like he needs to die for people, I don't know, you know, that's going ways, but if he thinks he's Christ or God, he maybe has to feels like he has to die, maybe.
Right.
Oh, true.
Other angle too.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe his death has amplified his message even more so. But I don't know that the Branch Davidian.
Like we said, we can't figure it out because it's
it's far out
it's
there.
Hard to rationalize.
Yeah,
right.
it is. You can't really wrap your head around some of this stuff. Most of this stuff.
Fun one here for the last one, Ethan.
Yeah.
You can read the decoded message of the 7 seals of the Book of Revelation by David Koresh.
So that's what he was writing.
Yeah.
Wow. And he finished it.
It's only 20 pages. So.
Oh, really?
Mason, what do you think? First week of school assignment?
20 pages,
sure.
Mason.
You cool with that?
That'll take him 1 month.
That's easy.
Oh. Looks like a song
It's
or
like
something.
a poem.
Yeah, a poem.
I think we'll skip it.
Yeah.
Well, to kind of go off of
it's got everything.
The aftermath of this, we talked about there still are Branch Davidians out there, and the complex is still not there, but you can go visit the site. There's a memorial. But a different way to look at this is how it inspired people. This is a weird way to look at it, but how it inspired certain people. Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, actually was inspired to do the Oklahoma City bombing because of this event. He went to Waco during the 51-day standoff. He was a strong opponent of the government moving in, and this ended up leading him to be so against the government that he needed to do something, and his idea was the Oklahoma City bombing, which it could be a whole nother episode on its own because there's a lot to talk about there. But it's interesting how a certain event like this could inspire even more evil to come about of it, because we try to think, well, there's positives that could become of this, and then there's the way negatives that come of this as well, that something even more, I don't know, there's a lot more people killed in the Oklahoma City bombing, 180 or something like that, because of something like this happening. It kind of makes you think how there's a domino effect with things like this going on. It's interesting to me.
Can I say something real positive, or something on the positive end too? With like religion. I mean, we talked about. I mean, this isn't your typical religion. You know, he read the Bible, but this it's still good to find if you need to follow or be part of an organization like a religion and find God, and become, be a part of a group.
Oh yeah, for sure.
If that's what helps you.
Yeah.
But you do have to be wary of these type of cult situations.
And this is such a rare thing.
Right.
Like we talked about, you don't see this very often at all. So, I don't think that people need to worry about someone like this coming around Wyndham and opening up the Island Park compound or something like that. Joyce, don't want you going off after this and growing your hair out and.
Well, it is an interesting Halloween costume, for sure, but
who knows?
Yeah.
Well, we really covered a lot of different things tonight. We talked about the whole kind of the case. There's a lot we missed. You could really talk about this for hours. You could go into details and you could really narrow down. But I think we.
I don't know if I could anymore. My brain's fried.
Yeah, we really talked about a good amount, and we got all the main points across, I think. So it's been a good episode, and I think we can. Another episode, I have Jim Jones and the People's Temple down, but I think that's going to be another episode because I figured we'd talk about the David Koresh and the whole Waco incident for the whole episode, and we did. So it's we have to move the Jim Jones and the People's Temple, and you were talking about, Joyce, the Hail Bob comment or whatever. The Hail Bob comment.
Yeah, that was
another crazy cult.
Heaven's Gate cult.
Heaven's Gate cult, yeah.
Kind of different. I mean, they have similarities, but the mass suicide and but still some of the ideas of impressionable young people.
Charles Manson on a smaller
scale.
Manson, that stuff could happen. I mean, easier than a large scale one.
It'll be interesting. Like we talked a little bit, how you can relate the cults together, but it'll be even more interesting when we dive more into the Jim Jones or the Hail Bob Comet or the Charles Manson to see the similarities. Like you were mentioning, how Jim Jones and Charles Manson, they both were musicians. David Koresh was a musician as well. Didn't really make it in the music, and so they found another way to get known or infamous. So.
And now we're not busting on musicians.
No, we're not busting on musicians. Yeah, no, I don't want anybody to get offended. Yeah,
gotta watch that.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see how you can relate, like something that happened here. I don't know what year Charles Manson was. I don't know if these were all about the same time.
60s, late 60s.
60s. Okay, so something from the 60s to the 90s, and I don't know what year the Jim Jones thing. That was maybe in the 80s. Yeah, 80s.
Mid-late 80s.
So how you could compare all these different...
87 comes to mind. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it was 87, something like that. All these different cults, how they can relate. Because I think we're going to see a lot more similarities than we think between the different cults and how the leaders used the people to manipulate, or how we manipulated people. I think we're going to see a lot of that show up time and time again, and how we can relate it all back to this episode. So it's been great to have you guys. I really appreciate you coming on for the last episode at the Bark in Windham. In this studio, we might come back and do a traveling episode, hopefully sometime in the future, and we can talk about some other stuff. Who knows who we'll get back on here, but it'll be a good episode nevertheless.
I'll come up for a real fun one next time.
We should do a really inspirational, nothing about death, or I feel like a lot of the ones you're on, Damon, would get pretty negative, or not negative, but dark.
We figured,
dark history.
Well, I've been on for drug cartels and cults.
Cults, there you go.
Yeah.
So, thanks.
Well, I guess Dane was on for the Molly Tibbetts. That was a pretty depressing one.
I was there.
Yeah.
The first one.
Yeah, you were on there. Yeah. So you kind of get both ends of the spectrum. Dane was also on for the parents in the sporting events one, which is a lot more of a light-hearted subject. So
here's where you run the montage. We're talking.
We're talking about all.
Jeff
of them.
LeCans was funny. We see if he could be an investigator.
People crying, people laughing. We have a little bit of everything.
Your school one.
Mason crying when Adrian was on.
Tired. Yeah.
Oh, you're tired?
Yeah.
Bedtime for him.
That was a dynamite drop in.
Now you're messing my mic up now, or my headphones. All right.
Good to have you.
Good to have you guys on here. He's out of it right now. Well, he's been in a lot of episodes. Damon's been in a lot of episodes. Joyce, thank you again for coming on. Hopefully we can get you on a Mankato. It'll be interesting to see what happens here within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm excited for you.
It'll be cool. Thank you. And I just want to appreciate everyone for watching, and we will be back next week with somebody interesting, hopefully. Try to get interesting people on here if we can. And we're going to be talking about who knows what, because we seem to find really random, weird, interesting topics that just come to mind. So thanks everyone for watching. Make sure you retweet, comment, like, share, subscribe, and give the podcast a positive review. Facebook, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're listening. We really appreciate it. This is the Clerc Podcast Show. Thanks for listening.